common drilling operation in Libya was using a rig that would be, the crown block of the rig would be about 150 feet above the floor of the desert. The pictures that I show, that I took there, were typical of the kind of rig they would use. There was a drilling camp. That camp had two parts. One would be the expatriate camp, where trailers are mounted on skids. Then there would be the nationals, where the workers lived, and they would have cabins that were mounted on skids as well, but they were in a separate location. And then there was all kinds of ancillary equipment that had to be used for the camp operation. But where I'm leading to on this is, in order to move a drilling camp, let's say you drill the well, you bring it in, you put it online, then you move on to drill another one. Well, all that equipment's got to be moved. That rig has to be disassembled. And numbers that I think I remember while living there in the desert was it took anywhere from 70 to 100 trailer loads, truck trailer loads, to move a camp from one location to another. As many as 100. Now, that takes a lot of time. First of all, you have to disassemble the rig. You have to take the derrick down. You have to take the engine compounds and free them from the substructure. Then you got to load all that stuff on trucks and then haul it off to the next location. Then set it all up again. So you're talking about a lot of transportation cost. You're talking about a lot of downtime, the hours it takes to disassemble and reassemble the rig. That costs a lot of money. And that's expensive equipment. Most of it's rented, I think. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a day for the operation of one of those things. So there was a reason why you might want to find another solution to moving these rigs about. Well, the solution came. And during the early 60s, B.F. Goodrich stepped in and offered a solution. And what they came up with was to design and build and supply tires for 4 trucks. Now, these were not automotive trucks. You had to pull these. Each of these trucks would have 4 tires, and there would be 4 of those trucks. What they proposed and did was to provide a means for just jacking up that rig, the whole thing, not disassembling it, lifting the whole thing up, putting those 4 trucks at the 4 corners of the substructure, anchoring them to the substructure, and then to pull the whole thing, an undisassembled rig, pulled by 2 Caterpillar D8 bulldozers. They built a yoke for that so that the 2 bulldozers could pull in tandem, and the whole thing was pulled across the desert floor. Now, this didn't work where you had rough rock, and it wouldn't work where you had big dunes. But in an area that was kind of windswept and relatively flat, you could move a rig in no time at all. And you did it without a lot of labor costs. If I remember correctly, the travel time of that rig as it moved with those bulldozers pulling it was something like 1 mile per hour average. A mile per hour. But actually, when you think about it, that's pretty fast when you're talking about the hundreds of tons of equipment that's involved in a drilling rig. I don't remember exactly how big those tires were, but I think they were about 8 foot in diameter, specially manufactured for that rig. That was the first one in the world they ever made portable. It was used right there in Libya, in the area where I was working. It was really interesting. So I thought as those men, those workers from the Oasis got out of the truck and were awed by the nature of a drilling rig, when I first saw this, I was really awed. It was a spectacular sight to see that big a piece of equipment being moved about on tires. It really served the purpose, and it speeded up drilling operations. I don't know if they still use those or not. There was another thing, and I never saw, but I knew was taking place. Global Marine was a company that built floating drilling operations. They would take a ship. They actually had one, as I was told, in the Mediterranean, and they mounted a drilling rig on the deck of the ship. And they would move that drilling rig to a location in the Mediterranean. As far as I know, they didn't use anchors, but what they did use is they had the ship being moved by propellers. So the person in charge of locating the ship on a particular location and keeping it there had to excite the propellers that move the ship, in a sense, against the movement of the current of the water to keep it directly over the hole they were drilling. That was another technological breakthrough. So now you got a portable rig that's out in the water. You can move it any place you want in the water. And I believe that when I was there in Libya at that time, Global Marine actually had a drilling ship. Really easy, isn't it? In fact, everything was on one vehicle. So you moved the camp where the people lived, you moved the rig itself and all the ancillary equipment from one location to another, just like a ship moves. Great stuff. Lots of fun to learn about the technologies that people use to do the things that we're called to do.
All right, question for you.
Yes.
What was it like to be a part of the first moving oil rig? I mean, how did that make you feel? Explain the feeling of being there and actually taking part in it. Because it's really significant, and you actually have a magazine excerpt advertising it. So share the feelings that you had of standing next to such a big tire, and just touch briefly on the excitement of being a part of new technology. I mean, this was groundbreaking.
Well, we had some pretty big trucks we used for our work, but they were minuscule compared to this. It was kind of awe-inspiring. Yeah, I think that's a feeling. I had worked around earth-moving equipment when I was in high school on weekends and during the summer, some big equipment, but it paled in comparison to the size of the tires on this. Yeah, it was exhilarating to see it. It was exciting. Absolutely.
There's some fun pictures. You have one of the guys showing his muscles. Everyone's real excited standing around it.
Oh, that guy, his name was Musa, and he was camp boss. Musa is another name for Moses, so his real name is Moses. But he was a real clown. But that truck he's standing by was a Kenworth desert truck. That had huge tires on it. If you notice closely in the picture, it had 2 radiators. Most trucks only had one, but it generated so much power that it needed a means of keeping the engines cool, so they operated correctly. That was a big truck, and it was absolutely necessary if you were going to move a standard drilling rig by disassembling it. You needed a truck like that. It was called a gin pole truck. It had a little derrick on the back of it, and they could lift heavy loads and so on and so forth. But that was a very spectacular thing to see that rig.
Question, how did it make you feel to be a part of the first moving oil rig? What was the feeling? I mean, if that were me, I'd be so excited.
Well, I think I was. I think one thought that came to me was, if you were the tool pusher, and again, the tool pusher is the foreman in charge of the drilling operation. If you were the tool pusher, your job was a lot easier. You didn't have to disassemble the rig. You didn't have to reassemble it. You didn't have to deal with broken parts because of disassembly and assembly. So I thought, man, this is a pretty smooth operation for the guy in charge of this thing. Saved him a lot of time and headaches. So that was one thought that came to me. But it was exciting.